In this video, we will discuss the subject of generative AI and the implications for those who are authors and scholars on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. I found out recently that LibGenAI had stolen my book, The Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian Context, an Illustrated Journey, and it was using my book to train its generative AI. This was surprising, but not exactly unexpected. So I want to take this video to share what I think about generative AI, what's good about it, the advantages it can give the artist and writer, what I have concerns over, and what I think is not really a concern. Now, generative AI is not unlike other new technologies that creates controversy and then settles into common use. Adobe Photoshop, only a few years ago, created a similar controversy with its ability to manipulate photos. AI is everywhere right now, and we're all using it whether you like it or not. Do you use Microsoft Word? You're using AI. Are you using Facebook? You're also using AI. Adobe tools? Definitely using AI. And if you use an Apple iPhone, Google Chrome, an Android phone, YouTube, or Google search engine, you're using AI. Let's face facts. AI is here to stay. And the question is, how are we as a culture and as academics going to come to terms with it? Now, I believe there are legitimate and illegitimate uses of generative AI. But I think what we should do is define a couple principles first. One is the fair use doctrine. Now, this doctrine is where you take copyrighted work and substantially transform it to create new work for artistic, educational, or commentary purposes. It's sometimes misunderstood as a get out of jail free card, but it instead is a legal defense. The other thing we want to define is piracy, and that's when you steal a copyrighted work and distribute it to others without providing sufficient compensation to the copyright holders. So, with that set out, let's discuss, first of all, what do I have no concerns over when it comes to generative AI? Well, the first thing is crude piracy. Now, the issue of crude piracy, that is, people copying one's book verbatim, is something I'm not really concerned about. There is something called the pirate's paradox. If people steal your book, then it's worth stealing, and therefore also worth buying. The irony for authors is that more people steal your book, the more it's pirated, the more it sells. Moreover, the electronic copies of my book have a lower resolution than the print copies, so those who pirate my books lose out on the beauty of the photography that is captured through the printing process. Let me just say that I have no concerns over generative AI and crude piracy. The other thing I'm not really concerned about is composite images. Generative AI can take photography from my book and create new composite images from it. If a human did this, it would be considered to be a kind of fair use. And in the past, I've earned such a small amount in selling stock photography, it never really was a significant portion of my income. So I really don't have concerns over generative AI using my images for composite works. And frankly, they're not even distinguishable from my photographs anyway. The other thing I'm not concerned about is the generative AI's ability to write fiction. Yes, generative AI can write fiction, but it is exceptionally terrible at doing it. Gen AI can't with any competence write with subtext, innuendo, or nuance. It's also ham-fisted in the way that it handles simile, metaphor, and other literary devices. In short, while an AI can write a story, it cannot do so with artistic flair. And the final thing about generative AI I'm not really concerned about is replacing scholarship. Generative AI currently does research at the same level as a grade 8 high school student at a C- level. It's not going to replace scholarship anytime soon. Where Gen AI really fails is where most non-academics fail, which is the ability to judge between high and low quality sources. Generative AI is just as likely to use David Rawl or Budge as a source as it is to use a scholar who is at the top of his game. Generative AI doesn't possess the introspective judgment to discern between good and bad source materials. And because it lacks that judgment, it's never going to really get ahead of the scholarly game, as it were. Now, those are the things I'm not concerned about. I also think, though, that there's some advantages that generative AI offers the artist and writer. And these are really good benefits, and I think artists and writers should employ these. First thing is marketing. Every author hates doing marketing blurbs for their books. But generative AI does marketing materials exceptionally well. Gen AI learns from the internet, and 90% of the content on the internet is advertising and marketing materials. You can take the jacket description for your book, run it through AI, and often AI will rewrite your description in a way that is better. You can also use generative AI to create for yourself an entire marketing campaign for your book launch. So, for marketing, AI is a really, really good resource, and you should use it. The other thing that generative AI, I think, does really well is book covers and stock images. Now, this one is a bit controversial, but there's nuance here. There are several people out there, particularly within the publishing industry, that say you should never use AI to create book cover, and that you should only use a human being to illustrate the cover of your book. But that's not exactly a given. The cover you get from a human being is largely dependent upon the human being's talents and abilities and how deep your pockets are. Independent authors don't generally have $1,000 to pay for a beautifully designed cover art. And even then, it is no guarantee that the cover is going to be appropriate, since designers rarely have the time to read the book they're designing for. It could very well be $1,000 wasted. And someone off Fiverr can design a cover for you that's within your budget that looks like complete garbage. Now, we also have to come to terms with the fact that some human graphic designers are using stock art when they create your covers. But also, graphic designers use generative AI to create stock images, expand the borders of stock images, or sharpen blurry images with AI. In fact, this is one area where even critics of using AI generated images will give human designers a free pass. Almost every critic I've heard on using generative AI for photos has said if a human takes generated AI images, uses them as stock images, and then photo manipulates those images to create new images, that's perfectly legitimate. So then the gripe seems to be less over whether AI generated a stock image, but whether a human being got paid to alter the image, adding an element of human creativity versus just rerunning an AI query to get the exact cover desired. But that then raises the question of whether an author who has mad art skills and was employed as a graphic designer really needs a cover designer. I'd say no. If you have the ability to take public domain stock images and manipulate them to create a cover already, then you have the requisite skills to do the same thing with generative AI images. The advantage that AI stock image generation gives the author is much greater creative control over what the cover looks like and expressing the look and feel of the book's content. Authors have to remember that their book cover is a promise of what's inside. If authors can control what is on the cover, this can mitigate readers being disappointed by communicating effectively the genre being written. This control is a huge advantage that generative AI gives to authors over traditional cover design. Okay, so marketing and cover design, I think, are huge advantages and pluses that generative AI gives to authors and scholars. Now, what concerns do I have over generative AI? Well, student plagiarism. This is already a problem. A lot of students are already using AI to write their term papers for them. Unfortunately, many students don't seem to understand that a computer writing their paper for them is no different than another student writing a paper for them. The difficulty for the teacher is what happens when every student falls into that practice. I once presented the opportunity for students to go to the library to get extra credit. They were told explicitly that they had to go to the library, sit in the library, and they had to look up images of Egyptian gods that had blue, green, or black skin. And they had to do it from books. Very clear about this. All the students who volunteered for the assignment looked things up online, and not one of them went to the library. Not a single student received full credit because they didn't follow the assignment instructions. Now, this was a voluntary assignment, but what if this had been part of the core curriculum? That's where the problem comes in. Because when students use AI to write their papers, the quality of those papers become evident to the professor and places the professor in a difficult position. If he fails everyone for cheating, then he has to justify why he failed everyone to the school administration, which in today's climate is now an uphill process, heavily weighed in favor of the students. If he passes everyone, he lets cheating prevail. If he doesn't use written papers in his classroom at all, he is now truncating the opportunity for honest students to grow intellectually. Generative AI sets up a no-win situation where honest students are punished by putting them on an equal footing with dishonest students. The other concern I have over generative AI is style piracy and deep fakes. This is by far my number one concern over generative AI. This differs from what I would call crude piracy. Generative AI can learn the style of an author and imitate it. My concern is the creation of works in my style and name that don't represent my views and beliefs. With LibGem having pirated my work, the potential exists to create new works that don't represent who I am. You could create a query that says, quote, write a book advocating the discoveries of Ron Wyatt using the style of David Falk, end quote, and then take that book and publish it in my name on Amazon KDP, which has relatively few checks. It would then be a huge legal fight for me to get that book taken down. I would have to spend large amounts of resources just to protect my name and academic reputation. I'd like to say that this concern is just a hypothetical, but it has already happened to author Jane Friedman, who had 6 AI-generated books listed under her name. See the link if you want more information about that. In conclusion, we cannot escape the fact that AI is here to stay. We cannot hide from it, as it has already become pervasive and ubiquitous in our computing infrastructure. Generative AI presents us with both tremendous opportunities and pitfalls that we need to avoid. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.